Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I'm co-founder at Ruby Reese and I will also be your host. This week we are delighted to welcome back Suzy White from the Dogcentre Kilkenny back to the podcast to talk yet again about everybody's favourite topic, puppies. We will be speaking with Suzy about a slightly different topic to last time. A couple of weeks ago, Suzy was on and we spoke all about training your dog beyond sit and paw in your own household. And this week, we're taking it out into the public domain. We are going out into our towns and cities and beautiful Irish countryside, and we will be taking the training up a little level to maybe more distracting situations and more serious situations as well, where safety is definitely going to be a premium and we're going to have a big focus on that. So really looking forward to introducing you to that conversation that I had with Suzy in just a moment. And I suppose while we were thinking about this topic in preparation for it, and also over the last couple of days, Chris and I have been speaking an awful lot about how Ireland is evolving, and we've still a long way to go with dog friendliness in public spaces and out and about in Irish society. I think a lot of us love our dogs, but I think maybe certain institutions are a little bit afraid of inviting dogs in, and I think sometimes the decision makers don't always understand that the modern dog of today is typically, clean and well behaved and kind of getting more and more used to going out to cafes and restaurants and things like that, and we know that it can work because our lovely neighbors in Spain and France and Germany and Italy and the UK can all make it work in hotels and restaurants and bars and all the rest of it, public transport as well. And a lot of it obviously has to come down to what the dog is used to. I think if a situation is normal to them, it's not going to be stressful to them, and they're going to be able to behave more in the ways that we would like them to in these spaces. So it's great to see that Ireland is going through a transformation. We would love to see it speed up a little bit, but maybe that's just our own lack of patience. But it is lovely to see kind of, an evolving dog community and the respect that deserves in our small businesses around the country as well. And I suppose we're also excited as Ruby Reese to be part of this evolving community, and we definitely have some really exciting kind of cornerstone announcements to make, particularly two really big announcements to make in the next couple of weeks. Maybe the second one is more like weeks into months, but we will be announcing these big pieces of news on our newsletter first, and that is partially because we think the algorithm, or we know that the algorithms on social media don't show all content to all people, and it leaves way too much up to chance whether you're going to see it or not. So for those of you that are really interested in staying up to date with what Ruby Reese is up to, make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter, which you can find on our website ruby-reese.com, and it would be highly appreciated if we could keep that communication channel open with you as well, because as we've seen, we've all seen it over the last couple of weeks with the recent elections and with changes in legislation and within social media companies themselves. Anything can happen with those media channels. So it's great to have a direct line to our customers with our newsletter, and that's not going to change. Anyway, back to everybody's favorite topic, the puppies. It is now my absolute pleasure to let you listen in on the chat that I had with Suzy White. Suzy, thank you so much for joining us once again on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good, Killian. How are you doing? Thanks so much for having me.
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for coming on. Would you do us the pleasure of starting off and introducing yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Suzy White. I'm an IAABC certified dog behaviour consultant. I've been running the Dogcentre here in Kilkenny for the last 13 years, and I'm one part of Snouting About, running Snouting About Kilkenny and South East.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And today we're going to talk about a really, really exciting topic all about puppies. We're going to talk about training puppies beyond sit and paw outside of your home. So we're stepping out into the great outdoors with our little puppies. What are the most important commands we need to keep in mind, particularly around safety and having an enjoyable outdoor walk?
So in terms of commands, it'd be things that you would have practiced, some things that we would have mentioned a couple of weeks ago during our last podcast, learning about puppies inside the homes and what training is important. In terms of outside, we can bring some of that learning on the outside as well. And this is where we say that all those functions and all those cues, commands, behaviours and skills that we teach our dogs are all functional. They all have a purpose and they all help build those foundations that our puppies need for those important skills they need just to cope with our everyday human lives. Bringing in some kind of responsiveness or engagement, little games like Find My Face, or even how we kind of build up a responsiveness to our movement or linking in with our movement are all things that are going to benefit us outside the walk, or outside the house, I should say. And these are things that we bring in even before we start the walk. So you can imagine if our puppies are going on a harness, going on a leash, open the door, and then boom, suddenly they're kind of taken away from their close-knit kind of safe space at home, and they're exposed to all kinds of stimulus and sounds and smells and things that they don't have inside, and now they're kind of overly exposed to them outside. So already, if we just start walking, it's going to get very overwhelming for our pup, and that's something that we're always trying to avoid. We want to introduce our puppy to the world in a way that makes them feel really comfortable and really safe, and where they're not overexposed or overwhelmed. They should be introduced to things without fear or overstimulation, and they should be introduced to things in really safe ways that they can build positive associations in a way that they understand. So even spending some time on their harness and on their leash outside in the front garden and just doing your find it game where you're tossing a treat, letting your puppy go find it and sniff it out. Then when they find it and turn back to us, rewarding that little check-in cue where they lift their head back up towards us with another find it and toss a treat in a different direction. Already you've built up that communication of your best bet is to respond to me or kind of check in with me, and I'm going to keep you safe here, and you have that communication, that listening ability with your puppy. So you've kind of already built that foundation that you need for the rest of your walk or whatever else you're about to do next with your puppy outside the home.
And so this might be slightly off topic, but I think it's also worth pointing out that the dog walk is about the dog going for a walk and not necessarily about you getting your steps in or getting to the dry cleaners or, you know, getting your chores done during that walk. It should primarily about them getting out there and exploring the new world that they've been introduced to, right?
Absolutely. So if you want to walk that you can march down the road or get your steps up, that would be our cue to leave puppy at home with some form of enrichment like a Kong or something and to bring them out later. Especially for young puppies during that early socialization period, which is before 16 weeks of age, where they're just in that early developmental period where they're just learning what it is to be social and what it is to just learn to be against all sorts of different stimulus. We don't want to rush them into this. They absolutely need to have a sniff and do some things like just explore the environment on the end of their leash, learn to follow you and respond to you. As the amazing Catherine Griffin says, it's not about the route, it's about the routine. Don't think about walking from point A to point B. Take your time. A walk for your puppy at this stage could just be a little sniff around the neighbourhood or driving somewhere that's nice and quiet where they can kind of take in some smells and maybe see some stimulus. Like if it is a car park that you're in, maybe park the opposite end where they can maybe see people and dogs and cyclists happening a little bit away from them, but a safe enough distance that they can take it in, but feel safe and secure and just observe it, not be in the middle of it. We don't want our puppy to become overwhelmed. We just want them to learn the skills needed so that they do feel safe and secure outside.
And I know this question could be a podcast episode on its own, but you mentioned leashes already. So loose leash walking is kind of the creme de la creme of dog training in a lot of people's eyes. How would you suggest people stop pulling and lunging on the dog leash?
Okay, so yeah, loaded question. The leash pulling can happen for a whole variety of reasons. If we step outside the door and puppy immediately goes tense at the end of the leash and tries to quickly pull, there's that's kind of a sign of there's some work to be done. A lot of puppies will be tense and kind of cower or even hold themselves tense on the leash and try and quickly get through something. Or they can be quite excited and try to get from scent to scent as quickly as possible, and you're just kind of along for the ride. What we don't want is to pull back on our puppy or use any kind of invasive techniques. As I always say to my clients, you can kind of imagine that if I held your arm back, you're not going to feel the tension and go, oh, we're going this way now. You're going to feel that resistance and pull against it. And suddenly tense leash means pull harder to our puppies. It's also worth noting that their behavioural traits, according to their breed, are going to come into this as well. Setters and spaniels and pointers infamously are bred to kind of work in a Z or S shape where they can take on as much odor molecules as possible over a gradient. It's what we've bred them to do for their very purpose and their role for the that we selectively bred them for. So they're going to struggle to walk nicely on a loose leash next to you that's just like 2 foot long. So the first thing I'd say is make sure that you have a nice long leash, 4 to 6 feet minimum. It's not to just drag drag along, make sure you kind of like not have a trip over your puppy, but they need enough space and enough room that they can actually investigate sense and walk without any kind of tension. And the next thing we'd focus on is actually just getting our puppy's attention, getting them moving with us. If we kind of walk backwards and they go, oh, what are you up to? And we reward that with, yes, well done. And then we kind of walk the opposite direction. They're kind of walking next to us and we heavily reward that with a treat scatter. Already they're learning that their best bet is to stay close to you. It's actually really reinforcing and functional to stay close to you. This is where we say it's not about the route, it's about the routine. We don't need to march the legs off our young puppies. A lot of their breed, don't actually need a lot of exercise before the age of 6 months. As it is, they just kind of need 5 minutes per month of age. So if they're 4 months old, they're 16 weeks, 20 minutes is more than enough. And use that 20 minutes to not get very far, but teach your puppy how to walk on the leash and respond to you, follow you, be really engaged with your movement. And if they go so far, you don't need to pull back. Just kind of be tense, let the leash kind of go tense and put no pressure or minimal leash pressure altogether. And as soon as they look back at you or the leash goes slack again, reward with, yes, well done, and then kind of walk the opposite direction again and get them following and engage with you. So these are our important skills that teach our puppy, really important skills that we need later on, but also they're learning that actually the most functional reinforcing thing to do is to walk with a loose leash or a slack leash, not walk tense on the leash.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about being outdoors in somewhat, I suppose, potentially overwhelming situations. So what's the best way to introduce a puppy to busier areas like parks or passing schools or out on streets?
So what I'd suggest here is to avoid those moments where it's a little bit busier. Like you'd see a lot of puppies sometimes going on the school run, and this sometimes isn't the best thing to do because of course children are going to come out the school gate and see a puppy and it's going to be so exciting. It's going to be really hard to control that moment, so it's okay to leave them home for that, for those situations. When you are bringing them to busier areas, make sure that it's a wide enough open space that you can get them space. And it's absolutely fine to practice doing nothing. It's such a valuable skill for our puppies to learn to actually not do a whole lot. Sitting on a bench and letting them watch the busier areas and observe where they're at enough of a distance that they feel quite safe and secure. And you can pair that with a positive association like food, or even have a little bit of a play with them or just praise. So if they're watching bikes or a lot of kids walking home from school and it's very loud and it's very different and something that your puppy hasn't really interacted with before, and it's been nothing but safe, they've learned to just be, so if you say just learn to just be and feel nice, safe and settled when they're away and watching all that stimulus, and it's been nothing but positive for them, and it's come from something positive from you like food or play. I've not been in the middle of it where it's been very stressful for them or even a little bit tense or overwhelming. They've actually paired a really positive to that, and then next time they've kind of learned how to deal with that. When we bring our puppies to somewhere really busy, like we do say to avoid high distraction areas like maybe a dog park or even places like daycares or really busy borders and stuff, these aren't always the most appropriate situations for a puppy. Go buy your puppy and make sure that it's a regulated, qualified training class or whatever that you're going to, or daycare. But try and just practice other skills around that area. This is where we can bring in our find it game, or their nose where consent games, or your engagement games where you're practicing find my face or look at me, or even your touch hand target games. Those are all comfortable patterns that we can learn at home and then we can bring into busier areas. So it's not that puppy has to meet everyone and everything in the busier area. They can safely observe the busy area from a nice comfortable distance. Pair it with a pattern that feels good to them and is positive for them, it's rewarding for them, like your touch hand target game, or your find it game, and they've learned to just build up a positive association and see these things and feel quite confident and secure about them. When we rush puppy into being overly exposed in these areas, that's where we kind of run the risk of them having a potentially fearful or stressed experience, and they can carry this through and it can actually develop into somewhat kind of troubling behaviours later on as adults. For now, take your time and just let them observe things, feeling really comfortable, positive and confident about these new experiences.
And does this kind of low energy, kind of reinforcing, positive reinforcement kind of attitude work quite well as well around wildlife distractions? So I'm thinking if you go to parks, things like squirrels, birds, or even other dogs.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is where everything else that we talked about, like even our loose leash foundations, kind of come in. So if our puppies are seeing high activity things like a dog playing fetch, like really intensely, or like that squirrels or cats running in front of them, if we haven't really given them any direction up until then, they're going to see these things and immediately just react exactly how they want to react, which is like head over, chase it, and there's loads of breeds that would be so exciting in that they just want to chase it, they just want to feel good about it. Whereas if we've already built up a foundation of being responsive towards us or engage with us or figure out what to do by checking in with us, they're kind of being like, oh, what do I do with this scenario? And we already get those check-ins that we want. That gives us the opportunity to reward those check-ins, and boom, we've already had a skill that our puppy's learning that, oh, even if something's really exciting or if I want to go over to it, instead of being frustrated that I'm on a leash, I've just checked in with my owner, it's come with something positive, and now I've learned how to deal with that. So they're all important life skills. What we don't want is to bring our puppies to really busier areas and kind of just let them off. And not even off the leash. Kind of be like, okay, you're on your own. You can pull me around here and I'm just going to be at the end of the leash, not really giving you any direction. Because that's where puppies can respond to things with like really high energy, and then they're practicing or rehearsing unwanted behaviours like jumping on passing people, passers-by, or jumping on an adult dog's head, and those aren't really appropriate social interactions that aren't going to benefit our puppies, but they're also running at risk of actually coming away with quite a scary interaction. Maybe an older dog gave out to them for jumping on them, or they've learned that actually the way to deal with passers-by is to jump on them and get that access attention and reinforcement, and they're all things that they can take in as adults or take on as adults. We want them to learn that, to just be, as I said, just learn to calmly and comfortably interact with these things in a safe way and to check in with you.
And when we're out and about with our puppies, they might come across things and might want to pick up things in their mouth that we don't necessarily want them to have in their mouth. So what's the process for training a puppy to respond to cues like leave it or drop it?
Yeah, so these are things that will have already formed some kind of foundation with at home. So if they're picking up things and they learn that if we respond, we're coming to take that thing away, because they would have maybe picked up a hairbrush or a shoe or something off the counter that they shouldn't have had, and it's been responded to it, but in their eyes, a chase game where we try to get it off them. And then when they pick up something, they're going to find even a pine cone is very exciting to a puppy. Suddenly they have things that they shouldn't have, and if they're used to us coming towards them to take it away, they're going to try and avoid your hands and avoid you coming near to them. So this is where we can bring a drop it or a leave it cue that maybe have been practiced previously at home into the outdoors, or we can just practice swap cues. So if they have something they shouldn't, then you can like toss treats to get them interested in sniffing out treats and dropping the item we don't want them to have. Or we can ask for one of their other cues that we might have practiced. Again, the hand target cue. Big fan of it, but if they have a positive association with doing a hand target on command, you can offer them a hand target, and they're going to think, oh, I love this pattern and this little thing that we do. So they're going to relieve the item that they don't want to nose touch our hand for hand target game, and then we get to reward them that, and then kind of distract them away from or redirect them away from the item that they shouldn't have had. So yeah, so it can be a little bit tricky. And if you do have a puppy that is a proper scavenger, and remember, scavenging is such a normal and natural dog behavior, even if it can be a little bit frustrating for us, it is very normal for them. This is where enrichment and appropriate outlets for those normal behaviors come in handy at home. But if you do have a scavenger, we can look at different things like muzzle training to keep them safe, particularly if they're picking up things that they shouldn't have, like, fox droppings and stuff like this, all those things that puppies are interested in that we don't want them to be interested in. Muzzles can come in handy, or a really solid leave at cue. You can really practice that.
And we learned personally how important it was with the leave it situation, because when Ruby was a puppy, it was also during the pandemic. Like, lots of people, we got a puppy, and of course, like, on green grass, what stands out the most? Only white masks and white tissues. And little French bulldogs apparently love to pick up white paper products. And of course, everyone was kind of freaking out about germs and everything. So it was so important. It hit home so quickly that we need to teach a drop it command, and we learned that really quickly. And it's so useful. So definitely that one hit home for us.
Yeah, we do. We love our useful commands.
Yeah, definitely. And then what about if a dog gets, very energetic when they're out and about meeting people, and maybe they start barking at strangers, or strangers' dogs when they're out and about?
Yeah, so these can be behaviors that can stem into reactive behaviors, or just like overly stimulated behaviors, and other behaviors that can develop from that as adults. So it's really important to know that they won't grow out of it. If we're seeing those behaviors, that's time to step in, and of course reach out to a certified dog behavior consultant or a qualified trainer for help doing that. But that's kind of an indication of a dog that doesn't have the skills or the ability to quite deal with maybe overwhelming stimulus outside. So the problem that can stem from here is people say, oh, my dog's lacking this skill, so let's expose them to all of those things where they can just kind of learn for themselves how to deal with it. And we don't teach our puppies or set them up for failure to rehearse all the unwanted behaviors by allowing them, without any management or any kind of ability to deal with it, by allowing them just to go and practice all those behaviors. What I'd suggest there is to first give your puppy, or even your kind of adolescent dog, if they're getting to that 6 months where we can kind of see these behaviors come about, first make sure that you are meeting all their needs for mental and emotional stimulation with enrichment. I'd concentrate more on sniffy walks, so avoid like highly stimulating walks in big, high distraction environments. Taking them to the park where you just let them off the leash and then just have a big rigorous game of fetch isn't appropriate outlet for that dog. I know it can feel like it is if they're overly excited, or if they have a lot of energy. Surely we just need to tire that dog out. But unfortunately, what can happen there is that dog just becomes fitter. That dog associates leaving the house and going for a walk with an anticipatory stress of, we're about to go crazy over a ball or something. And then we kind of have a vicious cycle of a dog not able to regulate their emotions or their stimulus properly. Add in a leash, and we are going to have a very frustrated dog when they can't have access to that dog, that person, chasing that bike that's just past them on a pathway, and then we have serious issues that we're trying to deal with. So concentrate more on sniffing for calming and decompression. Play find it games. Make sure they have lots of calming enrichment into their day. So that's sitting down with a long lasting chew. You could even bring in place work or settle training. This can happen at any time. I would start walking them in quieter areas, and then just build up your engagement. Work on your loose leash skills, and then just learning how to deal with kind of disengaging from very exciting stimulus in wide open areas. So think of like big wide open parks where there's loads of space to move away, and just start practicing focusing on you, and that you're a really good stimulus to engage with. Heavily reward and reinforce all that engagement from your dog. And then you could do some kind of back training or disengage training, where every time a dog at a nice comfortable distance, that they're not so close, they're barking and reacting to passing dogs or stimulus, but far enough that they can see the stimulus but not react. Each time they look over at the stimulus, pair that moment with a yes. And when they look back to you to respond to the yes marker, reward with treats. So you're going to get a dog that's learning to regulate those emotions of highly exciting stimulus properly and appropriately. So they can look over and go, that's exciting, that's my cue to check in with my owner, and we get to reinforce that behaviour. We're forming a new emotional response then, or conditioning a new response. And this can be for adult dogs as well as puppies. But you can bring in that training of just watch the stimulus from a safe distance, pair it with the yes. When they look back, reward them. If they're pulling over towards the stimulus or they're not able to engage with us, that's our cue to go, well, let's go, and move a couple of steps back. And whatever distance you need to start at, there's no set limit. It's whatever distance your dog can see the stimulus and not respond to it with barking or pulling towards them. And then you're going to start forming that new emotional response of see a stimulus and check in with me. If you have any trouble with that, of course reach out to a certified dog behaviour consultant or trainer, but that's not a behaviour that they grow out of, and it's not a lack of socialization issue and those kind of things that people can sometimes misinterpret it as. It's a lack of social skills issue, and these are things that we can work on absolutely easily.
And talking about calming behaviours and settling behaviours, many of us might like our dogs later to be able to, sit with us in outdoor dining situations or cafe settings. How are we approaching training this?
There's loads of ways to do this, but something fun to do with your puppy is to go somewhere or even set kind of a route in your head that you can head out, and every time you see a bench, just sit, maybe ask your puppy for a sit or a lie down, and kind of feed the floor in front of them, so in between their paws, and just watch the world go by and just practice just being. And then doing that every time you come across a bench or somewhere that you can sit down. This is then building on this, that you can then bring it to maybe somewhere where you can get a takeaway coffee, not going inside if that might be overwhelming for your puppy, but just learning to sit across from it at maybe a bench, have your coffee, enjoy your coffee, and just practice settle and being kind of that kind of environment, but in a really safe way. And your puppy's learning that actually you can just watch these things and not have to be involved in them. And build it up from here, but go really slowly and go at your puppy's own pace. There's no rushing these things. Loads of times people want the dog that you can take everywhere, and that dog sounds amazing. But we have to teach our puppy or our dog those skills before we try and attempt that. And that just goes at your dogs very much at their own pace.
Mm-hmm. And while we're outside, we might want to let our dogs know that it's the appropriate time to go to the toilet. Do you recommend training on a word, to the dog that they understand, okay, now it's a good time?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a word, it can be a sound. I've heard my share of mad sounds that we can bring out, because it's not something that you want to say in everyday language, but something that you can bring out when your puppy has it. So yeah, it's a great thing to do because puppies will learn to go on command, and of course, like assistance dogs will learn to go with busy, busy. That's just usually the words that you use. So all this means is that when your puppy does go naturally in their own time, you pair that moment, that behaviour, with a sound. And then you can kind of do that every time, and the puppy's kind of learning, that's what this means. Then you can start to put it on cue. So even if you're on a long car journey, to stop, and if it's time to bring the puppy out, that's when you can ask them for busy, busy, or whatever word or sound that you've chosen. And they've learned, okay, this is my time to go. And you can build up on that. It's a really, really good, valuable skill to learn.
I can't say it often enough. Like, do not underestimate the power of it. It's so good, because often when you bring a dog out, that there might be in a new environment, there might be new sniffs around and everything, and they might not know that you've got, time pressure or whatever. So it's good to remind them, oh, we're not here just for fun. We have a job to do while we're here as well. So super, super good. And like you say, for car journeys, it's invaluable. And then thinking a bit more about safety now as well to round things out. You might want to teach your dog about waiting at zebra crossings, or when you get to the curb when you're walking on footpaths. What's the best way to approach this?
Yeah, so this, like with the busy, busy command, it's kind of pairing an association with it. There's loads of dogs that will live in cities or towns and hear like the crossing that we all hear, the zebra crossing sounds, and actually know that's the cue to wait until they hear the go sound. So this is where your kind of sit command, or even just wait and stay commands can come into it. You can start where every time you go about to cross the road, asking puppy for a sit and reward that, and then give them some kind of release command, like okay, or go on, or something like that. So then you can kind of bring it into zebra crossings or anywhere that it's safe. And if puppy doesn't get it, that's absolutely fine. It's not something that you put pressure on. You can just ask them for sit and wait behaviours around the house, or even crossing door thresholds, and then bring it into the outside. But it's a lovely safety command to bring in, particularly for those urban living pups. It's really nice for them to learn that actually, obviously, they shouldn't be outside supervised without you, or not on a leash around roads, but to learn that kind of responsiveness around before you cross on a road.
And what I love about stopping at all the curbs, even if a car isn't coming, number one, you're obviously training good behaviour, but number two, you're building in so much routine. So many different things can happen during your walk, and we kind of forget that our dogs, they often crave a bit of routine. So the fact that you're building that small bit of routine in, that like we always stop here, we always wait till we hear the to go command, that it brings that bit of safety in their minds as well into it, and that bit of routine. So that's also really nice.
Yes. Oh my God, absolutely. Like, I totally agree. But also, it's just a little bit of mental stimulation. Again, going back to that, walk shouldn't be where you just kind of let your pup. There's no problem with them walking in front of you, but you're just kind of at the end of the leash, just going along for the ride, and they're just doing their thing, and there's no real communication or anything happening. And that you are kind of asking different things of them and keeping them in that listening side of their brain, that they're engaged with you and they're not just off doing their own thing.
And it is great to find that balance as well, because I mean, I know we said this at the beginning, that the dog walk should be about the dog, and it's great because Ruby gets, on our walks, she gets a great chance to sniff around and everything, but I often put in the headphones and listen to a podcast or some music or whatever, making use of the time still, so that I have the patience to stand around and wait for the sniffari sessions. But like it's great opportunity, like you say, to kind of keep checking in, because you're supposed to be on this walk together and it's supposed to be a team effort. So it's great as well.
And both needs are being met without kind of a negative connotation on your dog. So yeah, marching around, leave the dog at home, but sniff walk for you're listening to a podcast, which might be your meditation, and then puppies sniffing, so they're getting their meditation, or there's that kind of like mental stimulation moment. Then it's just been beneficial for both, which is all we ever really want. Absolutely.
And I love that. I love all the positivity around it, because that's really what all what having a dog and what having a puppy is all about, isn't it? That once your safety needs and once your basic needs are met, it's lovely to be able to have all these positive experiences together as well, and setting yourself up for success, right?
Absolutely. And then just building that dog human relationship that we want. That's so important, and that why would we have dogs without?
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant note to finish up on. Thank you so much for coming on and joining, Suzy, once again. So appreciated.
Thanks so much, Killian. I'll see you next time.
Thank you. See you. And once again, a huge thank you to Suzy for coming on and joining us on the podcast this week. If you'd like to find out more about what Suzy gets up to at the Dogcentre Kilkenny, or indeed if you'd like to find out more about Ruby Reese, you can find our websites and our social media handles in the show notes. Additionally, a quick reminder, if you haven't subscribed to the Ruby Reese newsletter, you can do so on our website, ruby-reese.com. And we will, of course, be back to you with another podcast episode and another brilliant guest next Tuesday. Have a wonderful week, and thank you for listening in.